So before we hear the words from Matthew 26, I just wanted to give it some context, because we're stepping into a room that is already full of tension and tenderness. Jesus and his disciples have gathered for a Passover meal. It's a meal of memory, a meal of rescue, a meal that tells the story of God's faithfulness. But this night is different. Just moments before our passage, Jesus has spoken openly of betrayal. He has named that one of his closest friends will hand him over, and the disciples are shaken, each one asking, "Surely not I, Lord?" And into that swirl of confusion and unspoken sorrow, Jesus does something utterly unexpected. He takes the familiar elements of the Passover table, bread and wine, and gives them new meaning in himself. He speaks of his body, his blood, his covenant, his sacrifice, and then astonishingly, they end the meal by singing a hymn together before walking out into the night. So our reading takes us to that sacred moment, a table, a blessing, a breaking, a giving, and a song that carries them towards the Mount of Olives and everything that awaits. So Andrea is going to come and read from Matthew 26, from verse 26.
While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives.
Thank you, Andrea. And so we're just going to think again about that time, because there are moments in Scripture when everything slows down, when the room feels tight with that atmosphere, the air is thick with things unsaid. And this is one of those moments. And Jesus is at the table, bread is in his hand, the cup is on the table, friends around him are confused and tired and unaware, and the cross is only hours away. And so what does Jesus do? He gives thanks. Let that land for a moment, because he gives thanks with betrayal in the doorway. He gives thanks with suffering on the horizon. He gives thanks with the weight on his heart that no one else in the room can see. So let me ask you, where in your life right now does it feel heavy? Just hold that question for a moment. You don't have to say it out loud, just name it in your heart. Because Jesus knows that place, and he teaches us something here. Giving thanks, gratitude, is not pretending everything's fine. Gratitude is remembering who God is when everything is not fine. Then Jesus lifts the cup and he says the words that change everything. This is the blood of my covenant. Covenant, promise, faithfulness that does not break, love that does not let go, and mercy that does not run out. So let me ask you another question that you might like to ruminate on this afternoon. Where do you need to remember God's faithfulness today? Where have you forgotten that he holds you? Where have you been trying to hold everything yourself? You know, I like to be well prepared. So I've been preparing my Easter sermon in the last few days, the last week or so. And one of the things that keeps coming up is that it was dark when Jesus was risen. And it was dark and everyone thought that it was all gone wrong, that the evil had won, cruel Rome had won, or the corrupt religion has won. Because they didn't know it at the time, but he was holding them all. He was holding all the disciples, all the believers. Where have you forgotten that he holds you? When we do come to the table today, remember it's not just a meal. It's not just that little square of bread and that little tiny cup of drink. It's a reminder that God keeps his promises, that God keeps his people, that God keeps his covenant. And then almost quietly at the end, Matthew tells us, they sang a hymn and went out. They went out into the night, into the garden, into the fear, into the unknown, but they went out singing. Worship was their courage, their strength. Worship was the way that they stepped into what came next. So my last question for you is, what would it look like for you to worship your way forward this week? Not because everything's easy or clear, but because God is faithful. Gratitude in the dark, covenant in the middle, and worship at the end. Because even in the shadow of suffering, gratitude in prayer anchors us in God's covenant faithfulness. And then there are prayers like this one, that are quiet, that are simple, that are spoken at a table in the middle of a ritual, that are spoken in the shadows, spoken in the last calm moments before everything breaks. See, Jesus is not on a mountain. He's not in a crowd. He's not at the synagogue. He's at a table with friends who do not understand. There is betrayal in the room, moving around. The cross is coming, and Jesus prays. Now, when I said to someone that this was what I was preaching on and I was calling it a prayer, they're kind of like, oh, it's not prayer. It's just what we say at communion. It's not a prayer. But it is, because he gives thanks. And giving thanks is a prayer. It's not a long prayer. It's not a dramatic prayer. It's not a prayer that's going to shake the earth, but it is a prayer of thanks, of covenant, and a prayer that leads to worship. It teaches us how to pray when life is dark, when the future is heavy, when the obedience is costly, because Jesus prays this in the context of what is going to happen to him next, and he knows exactly what is going to happen to him next. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it. Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them. This is the blood of the covenant. And then they sang a hymn, and they went out to the Mount of Olives. Jesus prays with gratitude, even in dark moments. Jesus gives thanks twice. Bread and cup, thanks and thanks again. If you think about this moment, we who have 2,000 years of history ahead of this moment, we know it's not a moment of comfort. We know it's not a moment of celebration. We know it's not a moment when everything is going well. Because this is the night on which he was betrayed. The night he was abandoned and arrested. The night that the cross begins. And here he is, giving thanks. Gratitude in the dark. It's not denial. It's not saying the pain isn't real. It's not forcing a smile. How many of us, when we meet someone on the street, say, how are you, at the same time they're saying, how are you? We never answer the question. How's it going? How are you? And if you do answer it, you're going to say, sure, it is grand. Everything is grand. Doesn't matter what you are going through, you are never going to tell that person on the street what's really going on. But Jesus in this place is not forcing that smile. He is anchoring himself in the Father. He is remembering who God is, and he is choosing gratitude. Not because the moment is good, but because the Father is good. Gratitude becomes the doorway into trust, the anchor in the storm, the prayer that steadies the soul. And Jesus teaches us something essential. When the night is darkest, give thanks. Not for the darkness, but for the God who is with you in the darkness. And so, the first lesson that we can take from this passage is that gratitude is not a feeling, it's a choice, it's a discipline, it's a declaration of trust. My second point is that prayer at the table connects us to covenant, because Jesus takes the cup and says, this is the blood of the covenant. This is my blood of the covenant. The disciples knew that word, covenant. Sure, they were in Passover. They were talking about the Exodus. They knew all about promises and faithfulness and covenant because they'd just gone through the Exodus story again. They knew about God's steadfast love. A covenant is not a contract. A contract can be broken. A contract can be cancelled. A contract depends on performance, but a covenant depends on God. A covenant rests on his character. A covenant is held together by his faithfulness, not ours. Prayer connects us to covenant faithfulness. So when Jesus prays at the table, he's not just blessing the bread or the cup. He is revealing the heart of God. A God who binds himself to his people. A God who keeps his promises. A God who says, I will be your God and you will be my people. Even when we wander, even when we fail, even when we forget. This prayer is a covenant prayer. A prayer that says, God, you are faithful. God, you will keep your word. God, you will not let go. And so the second lesson we hear is that when life is uncertain, remember who God is. Remember what God has promised. Remember the covenant. Remember that his faithfulness is not fragile. And so my third point is that prayer sends us out in worship. When they had sung the hymn, they went out into the night, into the garden, into the arrest, into the suffering, singing. Prayer leads to praise. Praise leads to courage. Courage leads to obedience. There was a time that Sean and I went down to Bantry to the Writers' Festival, and we were staying at the Eccles Hotel in Glengarriff. And on our way back from listening to the person talking at kind of 11 o'clock midnight, the road was blocked because there'd been a massive accident. It was a horrendous accident. And so they were sending us off to go around, to go to Glengarriff another way. Now, when I'm driving and I think there's danger, I start singing Blessed Assurance and Amazing Grace. And I just do them, flip them between the one and the other. And I get the words wrong and everything, but Jesus knows what I'm talking about. And Sean always tells me to shut up. It's just a thing that we do. It's, So anyway, my first venture on pre-sleep was at midnight in the dark without any light at all. And I was singing. And I knew we were in absolute danger because Sean didn't tell me to shut up. The road is so narrow. There are some pretty sharp inclines and cliffs and all of that. And we had to drive all the way around and then back down to Glengarriff via Kilgarvan, is it? Yeah. And anyway, we made it, and then the next day we decided we'd go over pre-sleep again just to see where we'd been, and oh my goodness me, I felt sick. I had not realised how sharp those drops were. So yeah, singing, prayer leads to praise leads to courage leads to obedience. Singing helps in the dark times. Jesus doesn't leave the table in despair. He knows what's coming. He knows exactly what's coming. He leaves singing with his disciples in fellowship. And that's the rhythm that we could go. Prayer, praise, courage, obedience. The rhythm of Christian life. We pray, we worship, we go. Not because the road is easy, not because the future's clear, but because God is faithful. And because we know that. And worship becomes the strength of the obedient heart. Worship becomes the courage of the fearful heart. Worship becomes the song that carries us into the unknown, even pre-sleep. And so the third lesson from the table prayer, when obedience is costly, worship your way forward. And so bringing all these things together, these 3 points together, 3 movements, 3 lessons, 1 prayer, Jesus teaches us, give thanks in the darkness, remember the covenant, and worship your way forward. Give thanks, remember the covenant, worship forward. That's how it is to pray like the Master. That's how it is to anchor our hearts, and that is how we walk through suffering without losing hope. Because gratitude anchors us, covenant steadies us, and worship sends us. And so what does that mean for us? What does it mean for your week, your home, your heart? It means that gratitude isn't reserved for the easy days. It means that covenant is not a theological idea. It's the ground beneath your feet. It means that worship is not the end of the service, it's the beginning of obedience. Jesus shows us how to pray when the night is long, when the cost is high, when the future is heavy. He gives thanks. He remembers the covenant. He sings, and he invites us to do the same. So as we come to the table, as we break the bread, as we lift the cup, as we remember his sacrifice, may gratitude rise in us. May covenant steady us, and may worship send us, because even in the shadow of suffering, gratitude in prayer anchors us in God's covenant faithfulness. I'm going to leave it there for today.